It's immigration and the economy, still among the top issues for voters. So who gets the edge at the face-off next week? Let's ask Democratic pollster Doug Schoen and GOP fundraiser Noelle Nikpour. Noelle, let's go ahead and start with you, because what I've noticed about President Trump is that he's hitting the battleground states and he is hitting them hard. He's focusing on the issues. And let's say, you're talking about the economy. He's coming to the table with new policies, showing that he's evolving, changing with the times, understanding that this moment is different, and trying to communicate to people that he will fix things. Is the message resonating?
I think so, Jackie. I think the message is resonating, and you're seeing proof in a lot of the polls where in these swing states they had him down, and now he's inching up, and in some states he's even going over. And you can see why, Joe Biden is sitting and prepping, which is good. Donald Trump is not. Donald Trump is actually out there talking to people, just like when he was talking to the waitresses about the no tips. I feel like he is once again connecting with the average working American. So it seems like he is out there listening and trying to implement potential policies that he can enforce when he is elected. And I feel like he is on the campaign trail, really showing people that he's working, going into different areas where people are not really campaigning, and going into areas where people are saying he doesn't have a fighting chance. And I think that I like the style, and I like what he's showing America, and I think this is what is actually going to make the difference.
Doug, let's go to you, because as the president is preparing right now for the debate next week, everybody's wondering if he's going to get up to the podium and give people something new, whether it's immigration or the economy. It's been a lot of the same. People can argue that his most recent immigration policy hasn't really been effective. What do you think he's going to use that moment to communicate?
Well, I think first and foremost, Jackie, the president is going to use the opportunity to do what he did at the State of the Union, to make the argument that he is in charge, he is aware, and he is on top of the issues facing America: inflation, the economy, and the southern border. Now, his arguments are not so great on inflation and the southern border. I know it as a Democrat, and most other Democrats acknowledge it, but I don't see him changing his message other than doing what he started doing this week, which is to call Trump a convicted felon. Not sure that's going to help him, but it will sure get a lot of attention in the reporting of the debate and in the conducting of the debate.
Okay, well, I want to follow the money trail with both of you as well. Noelle, the Trump campaign is reporting that it smashed Biden's May fundraising with a whopping $141 million haul. But we also know from 2016, money isn't always a victory. What do you think here?
Well, I'm a national fundraiser that specializes in super PACs, so my concentration is totally on the money. I think it does matter. And in the case where you had Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump won, Hillary Clinton lost. And even though she outraised him, it doesn't mean that she was spending the money efficiently. So you can have more money, but if you're not targeting the niches that you need to, if you're not doing the right things in the campaign, it doesn't matter, because it looks like that you're probably wasting money. So even though Donald Trump did not raise as much as Hillary, he obviously spent it more effectively. And in the numbers game, a lot of time the fundraising, people will look at that number to gauge where you are in the race. They view it almost like a poll. So the money is very important for optics, and it's very important when you get that October surprise that you are financially ready to have a comeback to whatever they're going to throw at you, and they will in October.
And Doug, right now, as Alexis reported, Biden is ahead 2 points in the polls in a head-to-head race right now at this point. But we also look at his fundraising. We saw him in Hollywood getting some, traction there for sure. When I look at the Trump numbers, I think it's roughly 25% of them are from those grassroots donors that are coming out to support the president. And the campaign has even said, if you can donate $1, we just want to see your support. He's getting that. It actually is very reminiscent of what we saw in 2016 when we saw that big upset against Hillary Clinton.
And Jackie, I think you're onto something. The polling is showing more enthusiasm for Trump now than for Biden. The financial contributions, even the small donors, are reflective of that. And even with the slight increase in the Biden poll numbers nationally, the swing states, from what I've seen, are about 5 out of 7, 6 out of 7, still for the former president. So I think Trump's in a relatively good position going into the debate. Look, let's be clear. This election could go either way, but there is momentum for Trump. Biden needs to make the case that he is in charge and has an agenda and has answers to the tough questions about the border and the inflation problem.
And Doug, let me just ask you, do you think he's physically up to the task? You know, when it came to the State of the Union, it's prepared remarks. It's very different than going head to head with somebody like Donald Trump. I know there are a lot of rules in place this time around, but nobody's really going to be looking at their notes or anything that's prepared. He's going to have to be quick on his feet.
Jackie, I think that's very much an open question. A 90-minute debate starting at 9 p.m. is a long debate. I have no doubt the first 30, 45, 50 minutes, both candidates will be fine. The real question is, after 10 o'clock, between 10 and 10:30, will both candidates, the president and the former president, be able to demonstrate they have what it takes?
We shall see. One more for you, Noelle. Expected at the RNC next month, Teamsters President Sean O'Brien saying that he's going to address Republicans there as the union still weighs its endorsement. He told Neil that it's not a sure thing for Democrats. Listen to this.
For far too long, we have just contributed to the Democrats, supported Democrats, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, always will be. However, it's unfortunate where people just assume they get our support because they have a D next to their name.
Noelle, what do you think?
I think that's huge. And when I saw the headline that he was going to be speaking at the RNC convention, I thought that that was pivotal. That means one or two things. Number one, you can believe what he's saying, which I do. But number two, he's looking at the polls and he is gauging that there could be, a new sheriff in town, so to speak, after this election. So he wants to be friendly and on the good side.
Final word to you, Doug. There are a lot of groups in play here, and that is what's going to be so critical when it comes to Election Day. What do you think?
I think between minorities, both African Americans and Hispanics, younger people, union workers, non-college educated, males in particular, this election is very, very much more volatile potentially than 2020 was. And we could have a lot of surprises in some blue states. And I think Democrats are waking up to that now, perhaps a little slowly, but rest assured, Trump is making inroads where he's never made them before.
And volatile isn't necessarily the word that we want to hear when it comes to this election, so we all have to be ready for that. I thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jack.
Good to see you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.